This happened to me approximately 18 months ago during my first year of college. Just to give a little bit of reference, I'm a 20-year-old female, barely over 5 foot tall, very thin, and guys objectively find me attractive. I tell you this because working in customer service, I am used to a mild flirting and attention from male customers. It has never really bothered me much before because up until this point I hadn't experienced anything creepy or abnormal. Coming from a large, low-income family, I've always been a hard worker and someone who is constantly looking for ways to make more money. During my first semester, I found a job at a local coffee shop which worked out perfectly. It was right up my alley, they were super flexible with my hours, and it was located near the college, so I got to meet a lot of new people that I went to school with. After about a month or so, I started to notice the regular customers and even could remember some of their orders. Among some of the regulars was a really handsome businessman who always wore a suit and tie every time I saw him. I thought maybe he was a professor, but I couldn't remember ever seeing him on campus. He was tall, maybe 6'1" or so. He was very muscular, tan, and had slick black hair. I always waited on him, and he always flashed a smile and was very polite, saying "thank you, honey," or "sweetie," and would leave the store, sometimes leaving a sizable tip in the tip jar. He started to come in more regularly and actually came in every day for about 2 weeks, and then he finally spoke to me, and I mean actually spoke to me outside of just ordering coffee. He made some harmless joke and maybe a flirtatious comment. I don't really remember exactly, but he asked if I would perhaps be interested in babysitting his daughter this weekend. I really didn't know what to say as it was kind of out of the blue and he didn't even know me. He sensed my hesitation and said he didn't mean to make me feel uncomfortable, but his regular sitter canceled at the last minute and he had luck finding students at local businesses in the past. I guess because it was a smaller college town. Being a little naive and very eager to make some extra money, I accepted the offer and told him I would be willing to do so. I was always the type of person who always sees the best in people and never really focused on the negative, which in retrospect was not very smart. My logic was that this person was a very handsome man who looked well put together and appeared to have everything together, which is more than I can say about 95% of the people I meet there, so nothing to worry about, right? So because I wanted some details and additional information, I asked for his address and if he could show me a picture of his daughter. I was unfamiliar with his address, and he said he didn't have any photos of his daughter on his phone, which seemed a little weird, but I didn't think much of it. He took out his wallet and showed me a very old-looking photo of a young girl, and then proceeded to show me 2 more photos of her from his wallet. He isn't in any of the photos, but at the time, I really didn't seem to notice that. So him and I exchanged numbers and agreed on a time, pay, and all the other details. Later in the day, we started exchanging more details via text. He wanted me to come over at 8 p.m., which seemed to be a little late, but then I thought, whatever, the kid will probably be asleep and I can just watch Netflix or something until they get home. Easy, much-needed money for me, I thought. Saturday came and I texted him to confirm the time. He responded and okayed everything, but was being very flirtatious, sending a bunch of emojis and things like that. I brushed it off and ignored it for the most part. I told my boyfriend the address of where I was going to, and let him know that I would call him if I needed anything. My boyfriend is the rational one in the relationship, and he was not very keen on this idea in the first place. He tried to talk me out of it, but I really needed the extra cash. Now this is where things start to take a turn. I pull up to the address and notice there really isn't very many houses around the area. In fact, the houses that were around looked like they were not very well taken care of. The man's house was very low-lit and very run down, with tall grass and weeds in the front yard. I remember thinking of the nice clothes/watch that he wears, and the house just did not match the guy. Well, not trying to judge a book by its cover, I reluctantly went up and knocked on the door. The man answered the door in sweatpants, definitely not seeming to be ready to go out. The house was very dark and uninviting. As I walked inside, I could feel the darkness swallow me. I looked around and all I could see and smell was filth and trash. This house was unlivable, especially for a child. I turned around, freaking out, and immediately before he could even say anything, and asked, "Where's your daughter?" The man said that his wife and daughter will be home any minute. Now, I'm a very observant person, and I waited on this man every day and never once saw a ring on his finger. At this point is where full alarm bells are going off. Trying to remain calm and slowly move toward the door, the man insists that I go see the amazing playroom they built in the basement. I will never forget the look in his eyes at this point. His eyes were deranged and he had a sinister smile. The handsome man I waited on every day slowly evaporated away, and I was now standing face to face with an apparent psychopath, one who wanted me to see his special basement. I didn't even think, and what happened next I still can't even believe I did. I sprayed the man right in the face with pepper spray and ran out the door and got into my car. Being a small female college student, naturally, I always had pepper spray in my purse. Once in my car, I began to process everything that just happened. I started to shake and tremble and felt like I couldn't move. What happened next still sends chills down my spine. As I looked up through my rearview window, I saw the man full-on sprint out of his front door and get into his car. I peeled off so fast and drove straight to my boyfriend's house. Being the stupid teenager that I was, I never once called 911. I did text the man that night and told him I called the cops and would call them again if I ever saw or heard from him again. He responded with LOL in all caps. Barely being able to sleep at all that night, I finally managed to fall asleep at around 3 or 4 a.m. after being consoled by my boyfriend. I woke up at about 9 a.m. to a message that still haunts me to this day. Looks like I'll have to find another babysitter, with 2 winking emojis. I finally called the cops because I was petrified this guy would try and find me again. The police were able to track the number and actually found the phone. It was found in a dumpster near my boyfriend's house, but they were unable to pursue any further as he didn't really commit any crimes or commit any acts of stalking. My boyfriend did some research on the address of the home, and it was repossessed by the bank 3 years prior. All I can think about is the playroom and what could have been down there waiting for me. I let my manager at work know about this so he could try and get his face on the security camera the next time he came in, but thankfully, he never again came to that coffee shop. I've since moved home and transferred schools. This night changed my life. I went from a naive, innocent little girl to someone who became aware of the true monsters that exist in this world. Who knows if he is still out there trying to take advantage of a young woman like me.
Last year, I was asked to watch my sister's kids while she went out of town for a few days. I'm a female and I'm in college, so I was home for the summer and obviously I said yes. My sister is 7 years older than I am and has twin boys who are now 5, but were 4 years old at the time. It was just going to be 3 or 4 days, but I was still really nervous to watch them all by myself because I figured not 1, but 2 4-year-olds would be really challenging. At first, it was, but I spent some time with them before my sister left, taking care of them a little bit so I could get used to it. Obviously, I'd seen them many times before, but I never had to actually take care of them. When my sister left, I did have to call her a couple of times with small questions, but for the most part, everything was going good. My sister and her husband have a 2-story house, with all of the bedrooms being upstairs, and I would be staying in one of them. The twins share a bedroom right next door to the master bedroom. Then there was a guest bedroom that I would be in. Most nights, I would try to have the twins in bed by like 8 or 9 p.m. On the second night, the twins seemed to have a lot of energy. They played with their toys and ran around the living room until it was time for bed. It took a little bit of effort, but I was finally able to get them both upstairs and in bed by about 9 o'clock. I went downstairs after that because I wasn't tired at all. I was hanging out in the living room when about an hour later, I started to hear noises coming from upstairs. I figured one of the twins, or both of them, were awake and playing around in their bedroom. I went upstairs to tell them that they needed to go back to bed. When I got upstairs though, I went into the twins' bedroom to see them both fast asleep in their beds. This was confusing me. Were they playing a trick on me? I shut the door and started walking back downstairs, but then I heard more noises again. I stopped. The noises weren't coming from the twins' bedroom though. They were coming from the master bedroom. Who on earth could possibly be in there? I had a terrible feeling about it and didn't even think about opening the door. Instead, I ran back into the twins' bedroom and shut the door. Thank goodness they had a lock on their bedroom door. I saw that the twins were still asleep, and I stayed by the bedroom door and listened. Things were silent for a minute, and then I heard noises again coming from the master bedroom. Then I heard footsteps leaving the bedroom and getting closer. They walked down the hall to seemingly go downstairs. I hoped this meant whoever was in the house was leaving, and I decided to call the police. I felt comfortable actually speaking now that the person was downstairs, and I dialed 911 and told them what was going on. They said an officer would be out there shortly. I hoped and was sort of expecting whoever was in the house to leave, and I listened close to hear the sound of the front door opening or closing. As I waited though, I didn't hear it. Instead, I heard footsteps coming back up the stairs again. My heart started to beat faster and faster. The footsteps were slowly getting closer. Then, they arrived just outside the bedroom door that I was in. I held my breath and closed my eyes. Whoever was on the other side of the door then tried opening it. The doorknob turned, but stopped. Then I heard footsteps walking back into the master bedroom that was next door again. I was still standing there, trying not to make any kind of sounds at all. Whoever was there stayed in the master bedroom for maybe 30 seconds if I had to guess. Then they came back out into the hallway and stood right outside the bedroom that I was in. I felt like they knew I was in there. Still, I tried my best to be quiet and not make a sound. Then I heard the sound of sirens. They were coming from down the street and were very quickly getting louder and louder. I heard the footsteps now moving away and go back downstairs. The police were there and in the house within a minute. To my surprise, they caught the intruder, which happened to be a man that lived nearby, I guess. It ended up being a long night, but everything turned out fine. I was just happy that the twins and I were okay.
It was a very long time ago. It all happened back in 1973. It was summer, I was 6 years old, and we were living on Monica Lane in Madison, Wisconsin. The thing is, I sort of recalled it but never really put two and two together until a few months ago when I was talking to my mom, who then went into great detail about it. I was a very gregarious child. Outgoing, extroverted, pretty much friends with anyone. It was at the time a middle-class neighborhood, and 3 houses down from ours on the same side of the street was a huge park. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a salesman, but my mom worked second shift at Meritor while my dad worked days. Now, I rarely ever really had a babysitter, only if they went out for dinner or a movie or something. But they did go out pretty often, and there were always older kids in the neighborhood to babysit. There was this one sitter who I really liked who lived a few blocks or so away, and they were down the street a little bit. Vicky had babysit a few times before that, and it was pretty uneventful. She'd play games with me and do my hair, play dress up, pretty basic stuff. So anyhow, one day I'd gone with friends down to the park. I remember that there was a ball field at the time and a sandlot next to the field. My friends wanted to play on the monkey bars, but I wanted to play in the sand. I looked at the sandbox and my babysitter Vicky was standing there. I told my friends that I was going to go to the sandbox and then ran off. We had played in the sand building a castle, and then she had asked me if I wanted to go get something cold to drink. It was really hot and I of course said yes, so she takes my hand and then we start walking to her place. She then started telling me about her puppies and asking if I wanted to play with them. Of course, I start to get really giddy, and now I can't wait to get to our house. This is where my memory had stopped, and after my mom told me what happened, the rest of it totally flooded back. My mother just happened to be talking to my sister and I about some of the places we lived, and we got to Monica Lane. I told her that I remembered the park and how big it seemed, and then she asked me if I remember being kidnapped there. I immediately thought that she was kidding, and then the look on her face told me otherwise. She said that it was around 5 in the afternoon and one of my friends had come to the door to ask me to come back outside, sure that I had gotten bored, and then walked back home. When my mom checked the house though and realized I wasn't there, she sprints to the park screaming my name. After going around asking several of the kids if they'd seen me with no clue, she went to the ball field and she asked some of the older boys if they'd seen me. One of the boys, I guess around 14, said that he'd seen a younger woman playing with a girl that fit my description in the sand, and that she then walked off in the general direction, and that was really all he knew. My mom ran across the street to one of the houses and asked to use their phone, and then called the police. By the time the police got there, my dad had come home and some of the neighbors were trying to help my mom find me. So there's this search party out looking for me, now screaming my name and knocking on doors. The police had gone back to the park to ask the boys if they knew who had been with me and if they knew who she was. Between the boys and the neighbors, they had figured out who it was that had led me off, but I honestly have no idea how they figured it out. The police and the entourage then go to her home and then knock on the door. She came to the door and she told them she hadn't seen me and that she'd been home all day. The police asked if they could come in, and for some weird reason, she said okay. They went through the house and then they went to the basement, and that's when they found me. That's what my mom knew, and then I remembered. It was literally like a floodgate had opened, and I then started crying. At 6 years old, you sort of just trust everyone, and she'd been in our home. I had never got a bad feeling from her before, and neither did my parents. But when we walked into her house, I remember that cold holy crap feeling washing over me and getting very worried. I remember starting to cry and saying that I wanted to go home over and over. She takes me into her kitchen and then gets me a glass of water and a tissue. I can hear the sound of dogs barking, and next to the kitchen is an open stairway. It then goes down to where the barking was coming from. She starts trying to convince me into going downstairs, then telling me that there's all sorts of toys and games down there. I reluctantly agree, and she then grabs my hand to head down the stairs. The dogs are going nuttier, and then I start screaming. At this point, Vicky's getting freaking bizarre. She's now screaming at me. "Shut the hell up! If you don't shut up, I'll throw you in the cage with the dogs and they're gonna eat you." Then she starts dragging me down the stairs, all the while I'm still screaming. I was scared out of my mind at this point. I remember crying so hard I was hyperventilating, and I'm screaming so bad that I'm not even making a sound. Vicky then flips a switch and starts being syrupy sweet to me, trying to calm me down. She tells me that she was just playing a game with me, and she tells me she wants to play hide and seek with me. Vicky must have been relatively skilled at calming me down, because the next thing I know, I hear knocking on the door from upstairs, and I wasn't crying anymore. The houses were all the same sort of tract houses that Sears used to sell. Not huge, but not small, but you could hear just about everything at any spot in the house. I keep hearing the knocking, and she tells me that it's just her friends, that they're coming to play hide and seek with us. Vicky somehow convinced me to let her put a piece of masking tape right over my mouth so that I wouldn't make a sound, and then she lifted me into this big wooden box next to the kennel. She put a really big pile of blankets over me and told me to be really quiet so they didn't find me. The whole time of this, the dogs were going batshit crazy, but for some reason when she calmed me down, they calmed down too. They still looked incredibly mean, but they were no longer frothing at the mouth, and they were only slightly growling now, until the knocking started. I remember scrunching in there, totally confused as to what's going on, still scared and convinced that the dogs were going to get out and then eat me. I was crying again, and also hyperventilating. I remember removing the tape from my mouth because I couldn't breathe, but I remember I needed to be quiet because I was so afraid of what she'd do to me if I screamed. I laid in that nasty smelly box next to a big bag of dog food, sweating to hell, with lots of tears rolling down my face. I sort of pushed the blankets to the side, but only enough so that I could pull them back over me if someone came. I recalled thinking about my dad and just really wondering if he'd ever come find me. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, I can hear what sounds like adults yelling my name. They come down the stairs and the dogs are going absolutely batshit yet again. Over and over, men are yelling my name, and then I hear a man then say,
"If you don't shut those freaking dogs up, I will."
I was in a really large storage box with tape hanging off my mouth when they opened the lid. I can distinctly remember a very nice man asking me my name and if I was doing okay. I don't really remember answering him in anything other than screams and tears, and then grabbing his neck so hard that my dad had to practically pry me off of him. I remember my parents taking me to the hospital to be checked out, and that's all I really remember. My mom said that Vicky was then found guilty of attempted kidnapping, and the last she knew that she was apparently in prison, but couldn't really remember the last time she heard anything. We moved from that area shortly after, and I haven't been back since. I do know that my mom said that her parents were really odd, but they didn't really know them. She had met Vicky from the neighbors that used her as a babysitter, and they had never really heard anything bad of her, and that I always seemed happy with her. She lived in the general neighborhood, but it would have been 2 blocks over and 1 block down. Mom said they never picked her up, she always walked over, Whenever they'd get home, they'd drive her home, but never really noticed anything out of the ordinary. Mom and Dad only met her parents when they came to the door to ask for forgiveness, that Vicky hadn't really meant to do anything bad, and that she was a good girl. My mom said that my dad picked up her dad by the shirt and told them if they ever come on our property ever again, he'd kill them. I remember her name and sort of what she looked like, but I don't think I'd have any idea who she was if she walked up to me. Hopefully I'll never see her again though.